is smaller than the front. So I'm going to start with the big one, which is the front bearing. And it gets a little tricky the way I have it sitting here, but we can make it work. Because we have to come up through the bottom. Get that on there. And I also put a mark to know where the position of my hole is at, because once I put it on the driver, I can't see the hole anymore, but I can see the OD of the bearing. All right, so with the driver tight to the bearing, line it up at my marked position at 12 o'clock. That should put the hole of the bearing over the top of the hole in the block. Get my BFH out. And hopefully not throw the block on the ground. All right, so we have our cam bearings in and our cam plug in, and I went to go put the plugs for the oil gallery here, and I see I forgot to, well, plug them off or tape them off for the paint, so we got a little overspray. Not a big deal. Take pipe tap, clean them up. I can blow air from this direction to blow that back out. Everything's dry. I'm not worried about being dirty or causing any contamination. So let's get these tapped. As soon as I have these plugs in, then I'm going to put back on the engine stand and whale away at the freeze plugs. Hey, while I put these freeze plugs in, go down here and check out the Haggerty Drivers Club in the description. Now I'm gonna move on and put the cam in, which may be a little bit out of order in some fashion, but I can reach in here a little easier if the crankshaft isn't there, because this lifter galley doesn't have a lot of space. And if I do have any issues with my cam bearings, like I kicked up a little edge or something while I put them in, then I can address that a little easier without all the other stuff in the way. So with that, I'm gonna put some red line lube on all the cam bearings, and then on all the cam surfaces, slide the camshaft in. That's what I was afraid of, that back. Of course, it's gotta be the back one. Won't even start. There it is. Well, we ran into our first snag assembling our engine here. Basically, cam bearings are in, went to put the camshaft in just as it starts to put into all 5 bearings on the camshaft. It's way too tight, it will not go in. I called over to Thoroughby's, talked to Mike, and he says, 1 out of 15 times you get lucky and you don't have to scrape in the bearings. So he gave me his trick. He said, what you do, take your old camshaft or a dilapidated camshaft, take a grinder or a cutter, and then come in here and angle cut, basically a slice, into the main journals. Take a file, get that little bit of burr off, and then use the old camshaft with the gear up on it, and basically just scrape them in. So these are to size. That little bit of lip will take and groove out the bearing, because the bearing is soft, and go slow and clean it up when you're done. So that's where we're headed. See what happens. All right, so before we go ahead and put the cam in, you can see down here in this back journal, that bearing has some like rub marks on it where I had the cam in and turned it a little bit. So the back one's, I'll say, the biggest culprit. I'm not sure that's the front one here. Let's see how this works. Took some on the front bearing. Yeah. Well, first off, this is going to take a while. Well, you can see here on the front bearing, there's some bearing materials that it pulled already. Nothing on the second. Really nothing on the third. Fourth has it, and the fifth is starting. So, the idea is wipe out the goop out of the groove so you don't drag it through the bearing. Well, you see now we have the camshaft will go all the way in and it rotates. What I want to do now is I'm just going to run a few more spins on it, make sure I don't have any weird spots. Get this camshaft out, clean everything up really well, and put my new camshaft back in. Oh, look at that. One hand. My fingers aren't even bleeding. Nice. Sweet. Success. Next step, get our crankshaft, get our bearings in, get our crankshaft in, bolt down the mains, and then move towards the piston. But before I get into that, I do need to remind everybody that I have already went through and measured for my oil clearance. Now, we've done this in past videos. We thoroughly go through how it's done. In real quick terms, you take and place your bearings into the saddle and up into the cap, put your cap down, torque it, and measure the distance. So you measure the ID here, and then you come over to the subsequent main on the crankshaft and measure that OD, subtract the 2, that gives you your oil clearance. Standard rule of thumb is 1 inch. Standard rule of thumb is 1/1000th of an inch oil clearance per 1 inch of diameter, shaft diameter. So these are a little bit over 2. So basically these are all set at 2.5 to 2.75 more. So we're between 2 and 3/1000th clearance, oil clearance already. So these are all set to go. And of course I already done the same thing on the rods as well. Make sense?
Yep.
Look at that. See? Just the way it's supposed to be. Nice. Here we go. Crankshaft in. Okay, well, we're on to our next step of assembling the pistons onto the rods. And you kind of see things kind of set up weird if you're actually doing this. So we're doing a stop motion for the time-lapse video, so that's why things are kind of stretched out. But before I start hanging the rings and all that jazz, I do need to go through and set my ring gap for all the piston rings and bores. What that is making sure when it's in the bore, it's tightened up. So basically this gap is correct, I guess we'll say. Now, what is correct? Luckily, With the ring comes a chart. And for instance, here I'm going to set it up as street high performance. So my top ring needs to be 4.5 thousandths times the bore, which equates to about 20 thousandths on this particular piston setup. And then my second ring needs to be 6 thousandths larger than this, so 26 thousandths. And then of course your oil ring also has gas because you used already anyway. So typically you don't have to file for those, but you do always check a couple of them to make sure everything's cool. But process is pretty simple. I'm actually here on 5. So this is my second ring. I'll put it into the number 5 bore. Use this piston basically depth because you don't want you want your ring square with the bore. You don't want it to that cap will be off. Feeler gauge already set up. They've been pretty much run 20 thousandths. If you come in here so here you can see it's barely 20 and I need 26. Pull it back out. Bring it over to my ring filer. Hold it up nice and square to that. And I like to go through and count the number of revolutions. That makes it quicker, the whole process as you get going. Of course, the first one's going to take you longer than the sequential ones because you're going to sneak up on it. You don't want to go too far, but if you do go a little bit over, it's not the end of the world unless you're like at a 1/4 inch gap and then you just wait for it just under 26. Now, went through and filed it. When you file, you're going to always raise up just a little bit of burr. The last thing you want to do is take the top down with that burr on there because you're going to put a scar in it. So just take a nice little hand file, just pick the edges. And of course the points as you go around, it is pretty close to a rectangle. Pull it out, put it through the ring filer, get it where it's perfect, and rinse and repeat for, well, all 15 rings. That's it. Okay, this step is fairly straightforward. You have your ring, this pin, rod, piston. You want to make sure that when you hang your rod, there is a direction. This one has to sit like that in there. The bottom of the motor, the top of the motor. It's all the way up to the top like this. And then your rods have your numbers on it that look at you. Because there's a big chamfer here that goes to the outside edge, if you will, the rod journal, and that'll make more sense when you look at the print. But make sure you hang them correctly, otherwise you'll take them back off. Oil. Here it is. Yeah, and to make things easier, I had to pre-install one of the clips. That way you can just bring in your wrist pin. These are slip fits, so it should slide right on in. Like so. And then we'll take, and you put one of the pin wrist, and then you take the other clip and put that in. Now, these can be a little tricky. You see there's a little notch. That's for taking them out. I ideally, we're not going to be doing that. So I like to put the end in right here, and then I push it. So there's a ring gland or a gland down there that's going to go in. Put the end in, and you're going to just work this around. And these clips gain a lot of different things. They're going to go like that. Now I'm not going to fully install these because I need to have it for our time-lapse side of things, but you can see that there's an effort to put those in. You'll probably put a little etch, scrape or whatever on the piston. Not a big deal there. If you need to use a screwdriver, you can do that to kind of drag it around, but then that goes in. Make sure it is fully engaged into the gland that it's supposed to be. If the wrist pin comes out, it makes for a really bad day because it tends to go through the cylinder wall. Nobody likes that. All right, rings, straightforward. I like to use a ring stretcher, ring installer, but you put in your oil ring first, oil control rings. I like to put and the biggest thing is to do everything consistently. So you'll see these have a little leg that comes up. I like to stick those facing up. Some rings want them the other direction, these want them this way. Now you take these lighter rails and you swing it about 90 degrees from that gap and then just slowly rotate it around. You can see I don't need to stretch this per se. It'll walk itself on. Hold it in position, do the same thing on the top side. That one's on. Now, your second ring may or may not have a dot. That dot is always up on the ring. If there are no dots, then the install or down have a orientation. So you get a ring spreader, and you want to open it just enough to get a little stretch the bar, wrist breaking. And you can certainly do this with your thumbs. You need more than 7 or 8 of them. You might find that your thumbs aren't feeling too hot. And then the top ring, same thing, dot. Put it on over this. Okay. Now, depending again on the ring setup, there's a location when you go to put these into the bore, parts where you want to locate these gaps. Typically, it's the bottom gap down and the top gap All right, so I have everything laid out here relative to my pistons, and I'm getting ready to put those into the block. As you see, I went through and pulled the caps back off from being balanced, and I have my bearings all numbered here, ready to go back on the rods. I've already went through and did oil clearance, everything's good there. Just went through and lubed up the bores real well with just some generic engine oil, and now it's time to slap her together. Here we go. All right, so start with the piston. Number 1 piston, put the bearing in there, and make sure everything stays clean, of course. And we'll put a little lube on the bearing. And rod side. I've already lubed up the wrist pins, so those are good. Before I can set this down in the hole, to lube up the piston. I'm going to do that over here over my container. You want to lube up the rings so they don't start up dry. Some people like to dump them in a vat of oil. I find that a little but definitely wipe it around all the edges that are in between the door. Take the rings a little bit. Oil. Okay. Then, just before I stick them into the hole here, make sure the valves are up, and then rotate your rings to where you want them to start off with. I'm gonna put my compression ring, number one, or top compression ring up towards the top and the bottom. Good that way. Ring compressor on. That's always a good sign. Meaning, you don't have the wrong rings. Okay. More assembly lube. More is always better. I've never heard anyone tell me, I use way too much assembly lube, and that's why I have never happened. Even with the speed wrench, bring them down even, the caps. Sideways. And the torque spec on these ARP bolts, Eagle rods, 63. Have that set. Now I'm just going to evenly bring them down as well.